Thank you very much, Lauren, for that very kind introduction. It almost makes the tie easier to bear. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I also want to acknowledge some legislative colleagues that are here with me today. Corey Tucker is a brand new MLA for a constituency called Saskatoon Eastview. I'm not sure where Corey is. There he is right down there. Corey's good to have you here. And as Lauren noted, I'm joined by a couple of cabinet colleagues. The first is the Attorney General, the MLA for Saskatoon Southeast. I'm not sure what the Attorney General is doing at the Wheat Summit, frankly. I'm a little unnerved by it. But Don Morgan, thanks for coming. Appreciate you having you here. And my friend, the Agriculture Minister, Bob Benrod. Bob has been busy together with Alana and MLAs really from the government side for 4 years, working hard to improve the programs that we can offer in the province, focused on the future, focused on innovation, but also making sure that our policies were right at the farm gate, advocating for choice with respect to how we market wheat cereals in this country, and I think just being the best agriculture minister, frankly, in the country. And I want to thank him for that. He and I haven't always gotten along. I can remember when I was in opposition, we had a caucus retreat where we were doing some planning for the upcoming election that we eventually won. And I, as I want to do, was talking while I was eating. We were having a steak night outside after a busy day, and I'm walking around, believe it or not, talking and eating, and I started to choke. This is a true story. First I thought it would take care of itself, but it wasn't really taking care of itself. And I'm still walking around, and I'm pretty sure the shade of color in my face is probably changing a little bit, and nobody's really jumping up to help me. Nobody. Finally, one of our young candidates who eventually became an MLA, now a minister, was a Prince Albert police officer at the time, jumped up and asked if I needed any help, and he was just about to swing into action, and that's when everything got cleared away and I was fine. Later that night, I'm talking with some of the veterans of our party, and Bob was there, and I said, you know, earlier today at the supper, I was choking you guys, and you did nothing. None of you did anything to help. You weren't doing anything. And Bob Benrod says, without missing a beat, he says, I was doing something. I was planning my leadership campaign. We've gotten along a lot better since then. So welcome for our out-of-province guests to the province of Saskatchewan. Let me just do a couple things. We have a lot of companies represented here that are important to the present and the future of Saskatchewan and our country. And so let me start with a thank you for those of you who are already vested here. Politicians don't do that enough. Simply say thank you for the jobs that you've created already and the families that you're benefiting in our province. We're grateful for that. Secondly, let me invite you to consider more investment in the province of Saskatchewan. This really isn't in the body of the speech, but I take every chance I can to tell you about the province that is being built by producers, frankly, by every resource industry you can imagine, and most importantly, by the people of Saskatchewan. This province has the second lowest unemployment rate in the country today at about 4.7%. We continue to break records in terms of housing permits, in terms of retail sales. You just mention an economic category and we're either number one or number two. The major banks have us leading the country this year in economic growth, either number one again or number two. We recently received a credit rating upgrade to AAA. While 9 European countries unfortunately have seen downgrades, including France, while America has seen a downgrade, we have seen a AAA credit rating upgrade, the only upgrade in Canada for a provincial jurisdiction or the federal government. We paid off about 44% of the debt. We're working hard to keep our taxes competitive. We've lowered them in terms of property tax and income tax and small business tax. And we have an innovation agenda that I'm going to talk a little bit about that we'd invite you to consider. So if you're thinking about a place to invest a little more, I'm biased, full disclosure, but I don't think you'd find a better place than Saskatchewan. And by the way, this is how all of our winters are. Maybe that's why Don Morgan's here to make sure there's veracity in those claims. In the tiny city of Urfa, about 30 miles north of the Syrian border in Turkey, you'll find the oldest temple in the world. It's linked, believe it or not, to the production of wheat. The temple consists of 60 limestone pillars. They each weigh several tons. Radiocarbon dating of nearby trash leads archaeologists to believe these pillars are 11,000 years old. That's 6,000 years older than the pyramids, 1,000 years older than the walls of Jericho, and only several thousand years older than some of our cabinet ministers that have joined us today. So how is the Urfa temple linked to wheat, you ask? Well, nearby was found einkorn. And as you'll know for a fact, but I had to look up, that's a direct ancestor of domesticated wheat. Wheat and livestock are the sparks that lit the fire of our modern civilization. There's simply no getting around that. With cattle and annual crops, some important things began to happen for civilizations the world over. Your previously nomadic societies stopped moving. They had more spare time where they weren't chasing food. They could build temples. They could perhaps find better varieties of wheat, better food. Here in Saskatchewan, we have our own temples devoted to wheat. The secular temple of knowledge, that is the University of Saskatchewan, was officially started with the laying of a cornerstone 29 July 1910. The man who had my job on that day was our first premier, a man named Walter Scott. He said this at that cornerstone ceremony. He said, "Saskatchewan is essentially an agricultural province, which is no misfortune. Agriculture is the basis of the business of the world. Farming is the foundation of civilization. It is in keeping with the character of our province that the main part of the highest institution of learning in this province shall be an agricultural college." And I think that is true today as it was in 1910. There is a lot of evidence, by the way, since to back up Scott's claim. The experimental farm in Indian Head, Saskatchewan, was established in 1888, well before that day. In 1907, 2 years after Saskatchewan became a province, the wheat variety that literally changed the world at the time was sent to Indian Head for testing. 3 years later, Marquis wheat went on the market. It was a cross, as you will know, between early maturing varieties and those with high gluten content. Marquis wheat was a perfect fit for industrial milling and industrial bread making, and it was the first wheat variety bred specifically for Saskatchewan and the rest of the prairies. Suddenly, farming became a much more worthwhile, profitable endeavor across the most inhospitable parts of the prairies. In fact, years before that, there was some scientific work done by a man named John Palliser on behalf of the federal government, who came out to the prairies to determine if anyone should live here, basically. His conclusion was that for most of southern Saskatchewan, the answer was no. You ought not to live there, and it won't grow anything. But we all know, of course, what's happened since then. In fact, in true Saskatchewan fashion, we now name buildings after the man who said nobody should ever live or farm in that area. The scientific capacity began in Saskatchewan in 1888 and has continued to expand over the next 100 years. And there are other temples, other than the university, other than Indian Head. In my hometown of Swift Current, the agricultural center there, the experimental farm, as we call it, has just marked its 90th anniversary. One of the specialities of the researchers in Swift Current is durum, and has been for a long time. Canada accounts for over half of the world wheat trade in durum. 90% of the durum wheat now grown in Canada is based on varieties developed in my hometown of Swift Current at that experimental farm. Kyle durum, developed in my hometown, was recognized as Seed of the Year in 2008. And we know how valuable durum wheat is as a crop. We hope, by the way, to add a little bit more value to that durum right here in Saskatchewan, now that we have choice in marketing, now that we have talk of pasta plants right here being built in Saskatchewan. Back to the University of Saskatchewan. Research became even more focused here in 1971 with the establishment of the Crop Development Center. Since opening, the center has released 51 new varieties of wheat and over 300 varieties of other crops. It is a proud history of science and research that lies at the foundation of our role as one of the greatest wheat exporting nations in the world. But that's the past. Where are we today is the question we're asking in government, is the question that Bob asks and that Alana asks, and I think that many in this room ask. And what about tomorrow when it comes to wheat? There are some important signals that we are noting. The three most important food crops in the world, corn, wheat, and soybeans, all enjoyed increased production until the mid-1990s. In recent years and in many regions, wheat has become as much a rotation crop as it used to be the king. Two crops, canola and pulses, that weren't even grown in significant quantities in Western Canada 40 years ago, have emerged as agribusiness favorites. Corn and soybean production have increased due to investments in research and development, in plant biotechnology, and production innovation. Not so much wheat. Not so much for wheat. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the province of Saskatchewan, I can tell you that we believe it is time to focus again on this crop. It's time to reignite the spark that literally launched civilization in many parts of the world, and certainly here in the province of Saskatchewan. One reason to do this is that it's good public policy. It's good public economic policies. We have a lot of natural resources in this province. 53% of the world's potash is here. We're the second largest producer of oil in Canada. We mine about 20 and produce 26% of the world's uranium, and we're third largest in natural gas, and the agricultural production is prodigious. You know the list, but we need to diversify for the next generation. We need to be thinking about the next economy, and for us, the next economy is an innovation agenda built on current strengths. We want to build the innovation agenda on our agricultural strength and on our energy strength. In the world today, the fastest growing economies want two things chiefly, well, many more than that, but two at the top of the list, I'd venture. One is food security, and one is energy security. I like our chances in that world. But we're going to need to build the next economy based on our strengths in the resource sector. And there's another reason that we ought to be about this business. It has to do with the moral obligation that I think we have in a world that's increasingly hungry. Lauren referenced the trade mission we were on in Bangladesh just under a year ago now. And it was a great trade mission. We went to that country and were welcomed as a province, in part because of an important staple for them, peas and lentils. We supply, in this province alone, 18,000 Saskatchewan farmers or so supply between 80 and 95% of either dried peas or lentils, take your pick, of all that they import. Comes from this province, not from Canada. Comes from the province of Saskatchewan. But you don't have to go far beyond the hotel compound there where we were with companies and with our own officials to see that there is obviously real poverty. Real poverty. There is a role for us to play even as we transform our own economy, even as we make economic decisions to do the right thing by these parts of the world. I was engaged by a story of Bangladesh that Step told me. Lionel LaBelle is here from Step. We sell a lot of red lentils into that marketplace. Bangladesh, unfortunately, has a high count of arsenic, and there's a salutary effect of our red lentils full of selenium on that high count of arsenic. In another 12 years, the United Nations reports that this world will be 8 billion. We're 7 billion now. We just welcomed the 7th billion not long ago. And a couple of days ago, the UN reported that food production will have to increase by 45% by 2030. That's not very far off. Smart people are asking if the world's farmers and if your companies and if jurisdictions that produce a lot of food can produce enough food to feed 8 billion people at a reasonable cost without destroying the environment. Robert Thompson is one of those smart people. He's a senior fellow, you'll know, at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and back in April of last year, Mr. Thompson said that over the next 40 years, farmers will be asked to feed 2 more Chinas. We're going to have to get really good at this, folks. There's an opportunity here, and there's a challenge here. There's only a certain number of variables we have to work with. Remember what Mark Twain said, buy land. They're not making any more of it. That leaves other important variables for us to consider, like the need for better seeds, for better fertilizer, for better irrigation technology, for better transportation technology, for better storage technology. And as for Saskatchewan, I can tell you we want to be a part of that. As for Saskatchewan, we want to lead in that. In Saskatchewan, we will build a world-class Global Food Security Institute to help lead in this regard, and we solicit and invite your consideration to partner with that initiative as we unveil the details in the months ahead. And wheat research and development has to be a key part of that. Wheat productivity is increasing at less than 1% annually, while the annual global demand is growing at double that pace. Higher crop productivity is required to close the widening gap between production and demand, something you'll know very well. We know that in order to keep up with forecast demand, in average, wheat yield must reach about 74 bushels per acre. We at 45 bushels today, on average. What is that, a 64% increase in production that's needed? Or more people will be hungry than otherwise should be. That is a stark metric for success. Increase your performance by 64%, or, by definition, there will be more people who are hungry. But there is reason to be very hopeful about this metric, because we're meeting here in the province that has dealt with challenges like this before and met them at the world scale. We have a solid record in Saskatchewan of rising to the biggest challenges in agricultural innovation. We've got the resources, 40% of the arable land in the country, 48 million cultivated acres. We have the products, we have the producers, we have the right companies. 86% of Canada's durum wheat comes from Saskatchewan. That's been a challenge we've met over the decades. The latest figures show Saskatchewan produces 61% of the world's lentil exports, 57% of the world's pea exports. We have risen to that challenge. Not long ago, we didn't grow very many lentils at all. But with vision and with persistence, and because of the innovation, I think, and the determination of our producers and companies, we have succeeded. Suddenly, that frightening metric for success, 64% wheat production increase needed, seems a little less frightening. But it's going to require some effort. It'll require scientific inquiry. It'll require innovation commitment, and it'll require some cash. Our province, through the Agriculture Development Fund, has invested $19 million on wheat research in the last decade, $12.7 million since our government was elected in 2007. And today it is my pleasure to announce this contribution will be enhanced. We are today announcing the allocation of additional $2 million per year over the next 5 years to support wheat research. The goals will be clear and focused: find new varieties, improve yield and quality, and in this we seek partnerships with you and others not represented in this room. We need to look for ways to speed up crop development. We need to use the latest biotechnology advances so plants can make better and quicker use of fertilizers, making them less costly to grow and easier on the environment. And perhaps most importantly, we need to use this funding to leverage research investments. It's worth repeating in this room, in wheat improvement from private companies, from companies we're grateful to already have in the province of Saskatchewan. The best way, we think, to ensure investment is to build partnerships, to create a welcoming environment for you to continue to invest. We want more public-private producer partnerships, period. Yeah, don't say that too quickly, but it's very true. We have the right people in this room today to forge those partnerships to advance wheat. Our producers who support research and innovation through checkoff dollars and who take the risks inherent in farming understand it. Our public breeders who have done an exceptional job of developing new varieties for prairie farmers and remain on the cutting edge of innovation and technology, they get it. Our private partners, many in this room, get it. I want to thank Bayer Crop Science for the wheat breeding investment they are making in the province of Saskatchewan. Many of you represented in this room, representing the life sciences industry, have made key investments in wheat in other parts of the world. We're saying this is the place for future investments. We look forward to seeing further investments from the players here and those from outside our borders who are not represented. We do have the tools to feed a hungry planet and to build the next economy, here and in other places around the world. This vision is good for economic growth. It's good for future generations. And truly, it's good for the people of the world. More and more of them every day. Remember what Walter Scott, our first premier, said. We are an agricultural province, and there is no misfortune in that. We take a look at the agricultural sector today and we understand what he was saying. It is a huge strength in terms of the economy of this province, but we need to be vigilant and we need to tend to it and we need to act like it is the potential engine of growth that it will be. Remember what he went on to say. Agriculture is the basis of the business of the world. Farming is the foundation of civilization. In a world that needs food security and energy security, I repeat, I like our chances, but only if we get it right. On behalf of the people of Saskatchewan, I just want to thank you for attending this pretty unique summit. I want to acknowledge our team who have put it together and hope that it's one of a series. I want to invite you to consider every single opportunity to partner with the province of Saskatchewan, and I'd ask for one final thing, that you wouldn't stop providing us counsel, that you wouldn't stop telling this government what we ought to do a little bit better if we want to make still progress with respect to agricultural innovation. I promise you, we will be all ears. Enjoy the rest of the deliberations today. Thanks for attending. Have a safe trip home.